After a series of life-changing, life-defining events, I began to work more and more seriously with the divine feminine through writing, through poetry, through journaling, through telling stories. And that work led me to discover core stories, the stories that make us who we are over and over again throughout our lives. Today, I am fortunate to welcome a dear friend of mine and a manifestation of Venus and the divine feminine herself, Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell. She's a psychiatrist, a spiritual teacher, an author, a social activist, and an artist. She's one of the few people I know who truly brings together a perfect marriage of art and science, and so it's a terrific honor for me to welcome you to this little opening introduction to the new website.
Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think what you're really trying to do with this new website is wonderful. This is a really critical time for men and women to learn, how do we work together?
Well, exactly right. I think that the paradigm, we're at an interesting turning point in the paradigm, the birthing of the paradigm. Mm-hmm. Our mutual friend, Dr. Jean Houston, is fond of describing this moment as being in the birth canal. And where some people get very terrified of the darkness, the scare, it's scary, it's frightening, but other people look forward to the flowering, the birth, the moment that we emerge in this new way. And I think that in order for that to really work well, men and women have to come together in a completely different series of relationships.
If you look at, what's fascinating to me is that if you look at religions like, for example, Hinduism, there's such an acknowledgement that the male and the female have to be together. There's always paired with everyone. There's always the partnership. And there's the yin-yang symbol, in Chinese. In Taoism, you have this, the feminine is in the masculine is in the feminine, and they together make this complete circle.
Right.
And so trying to achieve that state of consciousness is really what this planet needs right now. And I can see as a person who is a social activist and a person who has a private practice doing therapy, I can see where there's this miscommunication that's going on between predominantly men and women, but it occurs even men misunderstanding other men, because there's so many different ways in which one can be a man or a woman in today's society. And people are looking for leadership. They're looking for answers as to how do we do that.
And the people who have been providing it, I think, for several decades now, of course, are predominantly women. Mm-hmm. And women have gotten to the point where we see more and more of them in leadership roles in politics, in culture, in business.
Right.
And it's a terrific thing. Some men are really on board with this, but many other men have sort of fallen away from their women and in a way from their own lives because they feel out of place. They're not quite sure how to fit in, not quite sure how to relate in new ways. They recognize that the old ways aren't working so well anymore. Right. So what do they do? Right. And then to turn it around, I'm very interested in how women perceive that gulf that has opened up between women and men in that way. Even in the birthing of the new paradigm, as you know, if you go to retreats and conferences and workshops, predominantly the participants are women.
Yes.
A huge discrepancy between the number of women in attendance and the number of men in attendance. And that has to open up and change.
That has to change. And what we can see is that in the younger generation, people who are in their early 20s now, we're already seeing that change. But we need it in the generations who are in power now.
Right.
We can't wait until the younger generation is in that position.
Right. Well, we were talking about this recently. You have a daughter and I have a son who are roughly the same age. I think they're exactly the same age. And in their way of looking at this, they have a different take entirely.
Exactly.
Almost as if gender disappears completely in their minds and in the way their dynamics.
And that's what women of my generation actually wanted to achieve. We are the generation that started raising our children trying to be gender neutral. And then I discovered when I became a mother, that's when I actually discovered how different men and women are innately.
Yes.
You know, all of these women, it was really taboo to talk about how men and women were different. You know, back in the time when I was going through my medical school training, it was really taboo to talk about that. And I really didn't think, because I was so good at math and science, I thought that it was just a myth that men and women were different. And I had a lot of male colleagues, and so it wasn't until after you know, becoming a mother is one of the most feminine acts one can do, you know, that act of creation. And it was an era when women were really trying to give dolls to their boys if they could, you know, they could afford it, you know, give and make gender neutral, give trucks to their girls, and the girls wanted the dolls and the boys wanted trucks and the guns, you know, unfortunately.
I remember all of that.
And so what happened was that all of a sudden it became okay to stop. It stopped being a political issue. You know, it's still a political issue, but what I mean is that the politics stopped interfering with the science. But what I found when I was doing research in this area was that there had been decades of research documenting differences between male and female brains in a lot of different animal species, and including humans. And yet that was not making it to the general public because it was so politically taboo.
Right.
And I remember it was funny. Back then there was this saying, you know, they say save the whales. It was save the males.
Well, I would say more now. It's more re-educate and retrain the males. At least as I've come to understand it through my own very checkered and difficult male journey to greater consciousness of my own feminine. And I'm hoping that I can that I can play a part now.
But how would you mentioned core stories. So can you give me an example of how a core story plays into this? And let's talk about it with gender. You know, can you, like, a core story might be, you know, when you first noticed that girls or women were different, you know.
That is one of the core stories of Passage, yes. I mean, there are core stories of your inception, of birth, a core story of travel, a core story of love, core story of death. There are 10 that I work with, that I've been working with, and I suspect they're going to grow in number as I proceed and continue to learn from people like you, but also from every participant I've ever worked with in a workshop. I mean, as you know, the great thing about workshopping and doing seminars, leading them, is that you have the benefit of learning from all the people who are attending with you.
Yes.
And it's great to be a student perpetually in that way. But it's a great example, you know, when you first realize that girls and boys are, you know, different. And that is, for me, I was thinking about that. I think it was very early, maybe even in like preschool, or I'm not sure I went to preschool, but I did go to a woman's house, and she had kids that she took care of for single working mothers like mine. And I remember that the difference for me was when you know, a little girl would not argue, or would not no, I want that. Okay, here. You know, it was
exactly.
So unusual, because I was used to, you know, I mean, other boys would say, you know, he would hit you, or you know, you would get in a fight with somebody right away over, you know, well, I want that. No, I want it. And the girl, you know, I remember this girl didn't do that at all.
That was a shock to you. That was your epiphany moment.
Of course. It was the first glance I had that conflict could be resolved differently. Or disagreement could be, maybe not conflict, you know, I mean, all I wanted was an object that she had.
What's interesting about that story is that girls play. There has been a lot of research done on female psychology, and Carol Gilligan looked at children's play. And what they looked at was that they saw that girls tended to play non-competitive games, you know, like hopscotch is really not that competitive a game, you know, neither is jump rope, you know, and that girls would rather the game was less important than the social interaction. The game was really just a context in which to have the social interaction, and girls they'd rather let the other person win than sacrifice the friendship. But but actually, the research shows that because of the fact that there's such an innate desire for harmony and such a in children's play, and there's actually an avoidance of conflict. Girls don't learn how to handle conflict the same way that boys do.
Well, as you can see, we have a lot of work to do ahead of us, but we've begun the conversation. The conversation is ongoing. It involves not only the two of us, but it involves every one of you as well. And it will keep going. I will be offering a lot of new content, free content for everyone out there. I will have Dr. Powell back, I hope, and bring other people onto the site and make the site accessible to others. I'll be offering new seminars and workshops, books, and stay tuned, new blogs. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us in this introductory visit into your homes. And I want to thank Dr. Powell for being gracious enough to come and visit with us and certainly model for me and model for everyone, I think, the Divine Feminine's role in this great paradigm shift that we're taking part in.